before we get to some of the amazing predictions given to Billy through the years, why don't you tell the listeners about your new video news? I know the word free is in there, so go ahead and tell them about that. I think that's pretty exciting.
Oh, yeah. We just, in the last week and a half, almost 2 weeks, we put our film, The Silent Revolution of Truth, up for free viewing. And free is always good, as you say, and it's viewable on my site, theyfly.com, or at ufotv.com, which I think may have a bigger window to watch it in than we do on my site. But there it is, the whole 96 minutes or so of it, for free, and we've gotten close to 72,000 people, I think, have watched the film already.
I saw that.
That's quite a lot of folks.
That's great, Michael. That was really nice of you to do that for everyone. I know if the listeners think you sound like you're long distance, you really are. You're in Brazil. So there might be a little delay there, so I just wanted to let them know that. But I know recently you visited one of the most beautiful places on earth, Switzerland, to see Billy. So how is Billy doing?
Yes, well, actually, I visited 3 really beautiful places, but Switzerland would be, let's say, the most beautiful in terms of natural beauty. Billy seems to be doing quite well. He's a very resilient guy at 74 years of age. He's got plenty of different health challenges going on, and yet he always seems to bounce back very nicely, and I'm glad to be able to say that. And we spent, almost a couple hours talking off and on while I was there, so I was very grateful for that. It was a lot of fun.
So did he share any new predictions with you, or?
Well, it's not that there's new predictions, and I kind of want to make this as clear to people as possible. He has, of course, written and published his own prophecies and predictions since he was 14 years of age, that being back, in 1951. Yeah, it's okay. He also, of course, has published the prophecies and predictions of the prophets Enoch, Elijah, and Isaiah. And over the years and over the decades, one after another, unfortunately, of the prophecies and predictions have been coming true. When I was with him this last time, one thing I wanted to specifically address, which I did, was the movement of troops by Russia and subsequently by Canada in the areas, not far from the Arctic. For the Russians, they announced in July that they were moving troops into the area, a city called Arkhangelsk. I don't know if you've heard of that city. Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't.
Well, I haven't either, and I think probably a lot of your listeners haven't. And the first time I did hear about it was in about 2002 when I got the Enoch prophecies that were given to Meier in '87 and had been published in German, and I got a booklet of them in Switzerland and came back and had them translated and put up on the website. And there, as people can, see for themselves, Meier talks about the movement of troops into Arkhangelsk. And the reason he mentions that, or should attribute it to the prophet Enoch, he says, and this is supposedly a prophecy many thousands of years old before there really was officially a Russia, but it said in there that Russia would eventually launch attacks, invasions of Scandinavia, also of Iran and Turkey, and it would invade across Alaska into the United States and involve Canada. Now, when I read that in 2002, I didn't it didn't make any sense to me. I didn't know anything about Arkhangelsk, and I certainly couldn't understand why Canada would be mentioned as being involved in some hypothetical war between, Russia and the U.S. So when the Russians announced their troop movements, it was tied in as well with laying claims or going to stake claims to certain mineral rights. Then, a month or so later, whatever it was exactly, when Canada announces its troop movements in or near the Arctic, it's to make some declarations of their own about claims for certain territories and resources. Okay, so one of the things I discussed with Billy was, and I asked him, I said, look, in the past few months there's been this Russian troop movement to Arkhangelsk. Then there's been these Canadian troop movements. And this sounds to me like the very first steps of what's foretold in the Enoch prophecies pertaining to Russia, Canada, the U.S. And he said, yes, it's exactly what's happening. And there will be some other countries that will involve themselves, for laying claims around the Arctic or even, the Antarctic for, mineral rights and all of this stuff. So, it's like this has been posted on my website since 2002. We're going on 10 years. It's as clear as day. And people are saying, well, why doesn't Meier give us new prophecies? And it's like we're supposed to be entertained. This isn't about entertainment. We are seeing the fulfillment of the, unfortunately, highly unpleasant prophecies and predictions before our very eyes. What more do people want?
Good question, Michael.
So,
what do they
there
want?
it is. Yes. Well,
go ahead.
Yeah. I have a blog, and I just blogged the other day. I put up a blog pertaining to what just happened in Washington regarding the turning down of the petition effectively. I mean, it was the government said pertaining to this petition that people were, convinced that they must sign. And I've said for well over a year, maybe two, to stop wasting your time with this nonsense, this utter nonsense from the Disclosure Project and exopolitics and all of that, because as I pointed out in my blog, what really happened here was so obvious from the beginning, and people didn't think it through. Certainly the people that want to run everybody around in circles with petitions and that kind of stuff didn't foresee it. And that is that here they are banging on the door of the government and petitioning to tell us the truth about UFOs, and so the government says, oh, we don't know anything about it. We have no evidence. End of story. Slam dunk. Pardon me, these idiots set themselves up for this and wasted everybody's time, and worse than that, they got the focus going on utter nonsense, consistent with the alien abductions and this and that, and extraterrestrials marching around the world and contacts and all this totally unsubstantiated stuff that the exopolitics group is masterful at in terms of wasting people's time. And they deliberately have for years refused to even put before their own groups the Meier case, because they knew that had they done that, they would have been instantly out of business, and all of this fraudulent, time-wasting stuff would have been completely, just flushed. So now they're flushed, and I'm sure that they're going to try some other, great time-wasting charade And if people are gullible enough to want to follow that, well, go ahead. But here it is, the Meier prophecies and predictions coming true before our very eyes. I'm going to suggest that people, if nothing else, go watch the film for free, start to read the prophecies and predictions, and start getting a clue as to what you're going to do with your life here. Because you're not going to get anything out of the government about all this imaginary UFO extraterrestrials walking around. The truth is easily available. It's not necessarily pleasant, but you either deal with it or you live in fantasy.
Okay, well, I think that says it all. We've been told about disclosure for ages, and I think you're referring to Stephen Bassett, right?
Absolutely.
Right, and still nothing. Every president comes along, new president, and we keep hearing disclosure, and, they're not going to say anything, even if they do have information about aliens. They're not.
Well, exactly. No matter what, how Stephen wants to dog it, no matter how much Bassett is hounding people here, there's nothing you can do. And my point in my blog was, how can you be so foolish as to try to demand proof of something from the government that you have no evidence for yourself? I mean, why don't you have a petition? You might as well say, we demand that you tell us that, the Norwegians are living on Saturn. What proof did they present? None. Now, people will say, wait a minute, all these Air Force people and pilots, yeah, people have seen UFOs for the longest time, but that doesn't mean that everything they're seeing, even most of it, is extraterrestrial, and it doesn't mean that there's any proof of an extraterrestrial relationship. And they have, this has been such a charade, a cynical, selfish, self-serving, ego-centered farce on the part of Stephen Bassett. As long as he could get bandwidth, because people are gullible, so they'll follow along on this as if there was really something there. There's never been anything there. Yeah, UFOs exist, and if you're going to prove that they're extraterrestrial in nature, you better have abundant evidence. And the only evidence existing for it is the Meier case. How many times do we have to beat people over the head to tell them, is it just that it's a little too hard for people to sit down and actually think and, read their way through volumes of specific information and documentation, and that they simply prefer fantasies? It's very possible. But that game is up.
Well, let me ask you this, Michael, and I don't want you to hold anything back, but, there's been some documentaries on ancient astronauts. I think you know which, I think it's on the History Channel. I've been watching that, and there are ancient texts that talk about warfare in the air, UFOs that are described. There's wall carvings and things on caves that seem to indicate that aliens were here long ago. So how do you feel about that?
Well, sure. Meier covers, probably most of that quite in depth, far more than and I have to admit, I don't have a TV. And, there is a little one here where I'm living in this little cabin up in the mountains, but I don't think we get the History Channel. And
probably
I don't
not.
care to watch that. I mean, some of it's probably very well done. Yeah, they probably do some very good productions. The problem is this. They don't have the information that Meier has in detail on the gods of the past, on the civilizations, on the history. They can't even begin to cover it, and we have it for free on my website. Again, if that that documentation is very rich. It goes back 22 million years. And the problem with a lot of what gets put up on UFO-related shows is that they don't have factual knowledge. They do have limited information. Yes, there have been UFOs and extraterrestrials who've come to our world over many, many millennia. Yes, there is evidence, that these things were sighted and people painted them and they described them on cave walls and wrote legends, and the gods of our religions were extraterrestrial humans. Meier has, pages and pages and pages of this stuff. The who, the what, the where, the why, the how. You can read it for free. Now, we don't have it all produced nice and fancy on the History Channel, but we've got more information than they can ever hope to have. And, I and others have submitted requests to the History Channel to do a comprehensive show on Meier. They won't touch it. Again, just like with exopolitics or Disclosure Project, once you point people to the abundant, incredible information that Meier has been given by these people for 70 years, all the rest of this stuff is over. Yeah. I mean, this is just, common sense, and this is why it's suppressed. So people will have to, if they care, they're going to have to do their own due diligence. They're going to have to take the time to watch the movie for free, to search through the website, throwing in search terms and different words and coming up with all sorts of stuff if they care. If not, go play with your fantasies and, exopolitics and all the rest of it.
Michael, now you know what I want to talk to you about, and I found this really serendipitous because about a week ago I watched the most remarkable documentary on Nova about a 5,300-year-old mummy iceman that was discovered on an Alps glacier in 1991. And then I was reading the predictions on your website, and I came across the Iceman. And what I believe Pata told Billy about the Iceman, and long before they even found him, I think it was months before. And tell us about that story, because it's really just remarkable.
Yeah, and it's also remarkable, of course, that Nova didn't bother to, do a little search online and find this incredible story. So here it is. In 1990, again, here you go. But, the painful justice of this whole thing, and we won't feel it as justice, the painful reality is that as the times fulfill, and this is the beginning, we are in the beginning of the fulfillment of the prophecies. And as things heat up over the months and years to come, and as things break down and events transpire, people will be crying out, why didn't somebody tell us, blah, 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 and all of this. And someone here and there will say, hey, wait a minute, this has been available all along, but you just didn't bother to look at it. And we could have avoided all this pain, and we could have learned so many wonderful things. But no, the greed and the power hunger of the media, of the governments, and of the UFO community, which is the biggest enemy of the truth, even worse than the government, is the UFO community. They just cling tightly to their tiny little world to run around and chase lights in the sky. So, to answer your question.
Yes.
In 1991, I think it was, Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, the scientists called him Utsi, but I guess Billy called him Urk, and that was the name that the extraterrestrials gave him. So go ahead and tell the rest of the story.
All right.
Because it's just incredible.
Sure. Well, in 1991, in May of 1991, as you mentioned, Meier was told that there would be a discovery in the Austrian Alps, and I think it's called the Similaun Glacier, that they were going to find the mummified remains of this corpse. And in 1991, they said that he had died precisely 5,105 years prior, to then. So, so now it would be 5125 or so. And this was very interesting, and I'll jump around a little just so people can, get a little payoff. He was told that this would happen, and they thought it was going to be around September 20th, whatever. It was found, in August or September. And, of course, the skeptics could say, well, Billy Meier just went back and he backdated his information to make it look like he was some genius, psychic, or that he had contacts with these extraterrestrials and they don't exist, blah, blah. Okay. But a funny thing happened. Meier, of course, publishes his transcript in 91, and then he publishes it again in what's called a contact block. It's contained in a whole block of many, many, many contacts that are put together, and that was published in 1996, 5 years later. Well, the skeptics, of course, could say, look, that's the only time it was really published. This is nonsense. Okay, here's where the other shoe drops very loudly through many, many, many floors. In 2001, scientists decided to take the mummy into a hospital in Italy because they now recognized, having the CT scan capability, they could probably determine what killed this guy 5,100 and some years ago.
Right.
So they scanned him. And they found a couple interesting things. One, his skull was cracked in the back.
Right.
A concussion was very obvious. And two, there was an arrowhead in his back. And so naturally, the scientists drew a logical conclusion, and that was that somebody had, shot him with an arrow, and that's how he died, and, blah, 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 end of discussion. However, it gets a little interesting when you go back to the transcript that Meier had published first in 1991, and then in this copyrighted collection in 1996. Because Meier wanted to know, of course, what killed the guy, and this is what we are told in the translation. His death happened at that time in such a way that he fell. Apparently fell down a distance, not from just standing somewhere, caused by an epileptic fit.
Oh.
And was severely, and then was severely injured by one of his own arrows when he fell on his back. Now, folks, bear with me. 5,100 years ago, living up in the freezing butt Austrian Alps, you could die from frostbite and exposure, that's hypothermia. You could fall. You could die from being crushed by falling objects. You could drown. You could die of food poisoning or starvation. You could be killed by a wild animal or, of course, another person. You could be killed by knife or spear or, yes, arrow. You could be beaten to death. You name it. You could come up with a couple dozen possible causes. But in 1991, Meier is told that the man falls on his back from an epileptic seizure and lands on one of his arrows. Now, what are the chances that at a minimum 5 to 10 years after Meier publishes this, that scientists will discover that the guy's got a cracked skull, a concussion from falling, and an arrow lodged in his back?
Right.
Okay, take it one more step. I mean, this is amazing stuff. So people, I thought, well, I don't know, maybe someone shot him with an arrow. And I was talking to somebody, and the guy said to me, no way. He said, that information from Meier is right. Nobody shot the guy with an arrow. I said, well, how can you be so sure? And he said, look, whether it's 5,100 years ago or 100 years ago, any primitive peoples who hand carve, who craft their own weapons and spend the time to chisel out arrowheads, if they shoot somebody or an animal, the last thing they do is leave the arrowhead in the creature. Unless it was a war and they were killed, and there was no evidence that anybody else was killed, they're going to take the arrow out, even if it's in some guy's back. So the fact that, you've got this broken arrowhead, hey, folks, it's another circumstantial, if you will, arrow, pardon me, in the target that just gives us, irrefutable evidence that Meier was right. He was told the truth, and the only way he could have known this from 5 to 10 years before is exactly the way he says he was told by extraterrestrials. And that, my friends, is the story of the Iceman mummy that nobody apparently couldn't find. I'm sorry,
Michael,
go ahead.
I was going to say, it seems like it was beyond coincidence that these two hikers found him. What the scientists said that, his body should have been smashed during the 5,000 years of the glacier movement and the rocks and everything else, but his body was totally intact. I mean, it was like, his skin, his internal organs, although they were kind of moved around inside him, but, they found out what he was eating, before he died. They knew he was eating the wild goats that were in the area, the grains, but isn't it strange that those two hikers would find him after all that time? It's like maybe the aliens had set it all up for them.
Well, according to the story, according to what Meier was told, some ancestors of the Plejarans had interacted with this man. They knew him. He had saved them from a bear attack. And so it's very, very interesting indeed that there should have been, this kind of a so-called coincidence, and that Meier had been the one, to learn about it. Oh, my goodness, of course. I agree.
Now, Urk was a leader of his tribe, or he was a very important person of his tribe, right?
Yes, according to this, he was, and in part due to the fact that he had been observed with these strangers. He was even, I think, taken on board the craft with them sometimes and shown things, and then, of course, released. So he had a lot of status, among the clan or the tribe he was connected with. So it would be fair to say that if what they're saying is true, it's pretty amazing story, and he was a mover and a shaker for the time. Yeah.
Well, it is an incredible story, and just proves that Billy Meier, did know beforehand. People that have their doubts out there, I think that would prove it, that, he was shown. And, it just really boggles my mind. It really does.
Yep, I'm with you. I mean, look, this is, I'll tell you, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say everything that I watched on there, just seems to go, they kept saying that they were sure that he was murdered because the flint that they found lodged in his left shoulder severed a major blood vessel, and they felt that whoever was following him up the mountain, had pulled out the shaft, because they didn't find the shaft with all the other stuff that was with Irk in the ice. So they assumed right away that he was murdered, but because who knows why, but and they left the copper axe behind, which would have been really important for them to take, and that was a major tool, and I'm sure that that would have been very important to take or steal if you're going to kill your enemy. Wouldn't you think, Michael?
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Mm-hmm. That is so important, and people. I'm surprised they didn't. That they did not think about this. That they didn't realize that nobody would leave him leave the axe either.
Right.
Oh, boy. And I think in one of the in one of the linked articles online, I think they mentioned a broken arrow next to his body. And I'll, have to go back and look because I'm trying to remember which article I thought I saw that in. But this, look, Betsy, I think that if it was maybe 1970 now, and we hadn't had all of this disinformation and nonsense about aliens and just the relentless churning out of fantasies and entertainment, if the Meier case with all this information had been made public, had happened and had been able to get into the media, the world would have gone wild with this, seeking out this knowledge.
Sure.
But it's a greedy world we're in. It's a sad thing. People want fantasy. There'll be no shortage of people that'll still be talking about aliens, as if they even had any idea what they were talking about, and they don't. It's just that simple.
No, they don't. Michael, lately there's been a lot of strange things that have been seen up in the sky, and a lot of spirals, like the one in, in Norway. And I was wondering, do you think that could be holographic inserts?
Well, there could be any number of things, but I think what we have to do is really not even concern ourselves very much with that kind of phenomenon unless we get something that you can take to the bank that means something. What's the point? Really? This is where people, again, get run around by phenomenon that yields nothing. Could something be extra? Okay, could be. So what? That's my position.
Well, I'm thinking more like our military is doing it for whatever reason. I don't know, but I wasn't thinking in the lines of alien, with some of these things that we're seeing up in the sky, because I think that they've developed some amazing holographic type technology. And I think we're being hoodwinked.
Well, you could be right.
Yeah.
You could be right. I'm not. I wouldn't say it's not possible because, again, even if it is our own military, and certainly that should be found out if that's the case. We have to not lose our perspective, and we've got to think, try and think a little more deeply. What are we going to gain from all this? What do we do? This is, this is part of what bothers me because there is no there. You're not going to get the government or whoever to admit that they have the technology that they do. You're not going to get the governments of maybe 4 other countries to admit that they have alternative technology and stuff. And part of the reason for that is that a lot of this stuff, it isn't with the official government. It all is part of secret, governments, top, black projects and secret military. And we're not the only country that has that type of thing. So it isn't going to benefit the average human being to run around salivating about the UFOs and holograms and all this if they don't get a very strong understanding of the essence of this whole thing, of why has the Meier case happened. And yes, I always go back to it because it's the only thing that has substance to it. Now, if somebody wants to come along and tell me Roswell, there's nothing left in Roswell. What are you going to do with Roswell? Nothing. Zero. No. Did it happen? Yeah. I heard about it in 1957 or 58 when I was a kid in high school. Mm-hmm. I had been told by a kid whose dad was in the Air Force, they found the flying saucer and they'd taken it to Ohio and blah, blah, blah. So what? You cannot get, a rivet, a piece of anything left from Roswell. So Roswell is the government's favorite UFO case because they know that dopey people are going to keep on chasing their own tails round in circles, chasing Roswell. Have a nice day. Nothing coming from that. So if I always come off as a bit cynical and frustrated, it's because I don't understand why people refuse to think. That's all.
Oh, Michael, don't hold anything back now. I don't want you to do that.
Yeah. Well, at some point I'll tell you what I really think. Yeah.
Well, I wish you would. Let's switch gears for a minute. Let's talk about the environment because I think we're almost at the 12th hour here with the planet and what we're doing to the planet. We're just seeing the destruction of forests, rainforests, and we're seeing the oceans being destroyed. The coral reefs are dying everywhere. We've got animals going extinct by the thousands. We're just in a bad place. And I'm just wondering what Billy was told or what you believe we're headed for. Can we change things?
Well, yeah, it'd be nice to say yes, wouldn't it? I'll just tell you that, look, Meier started warning about this in 1951. 1951. Wow. Unnatural, climate change, and then in 58, global warming and cooling. He got them both because he says they are going to both be manifesting with these as erratic, changes with an increase in the frequency and intensity of storms, floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, you name it. And this is what we're seeing. And you're right, and we haven't seen the last of the BP oil spill. And gosh knows we have not seen the last of Fukushima's effects on our world. Those are meltdowns going on. And Meier was told in the week when he said he was told this is a beyond super worst case scenario already. They're just not going to tell you. So, it's like I don't know what to say anymore about it. I mean, certainly we should do what we can and work towards things. But look, people have said, well, what's the solution? Shouldn't we all have solar power? And you know what? The Plejarans and Meier said no. Solar power is good in isolated circumstances, maybe private homes and small things. There is an answer to the energy situation. It isn't waiting for so-called free energy. It's very simple. Deep geothermal, digging deeply into the earth putting in turbine, forwarding plants. There's a way, and now, fortunately, I think in Switzerland and maybe Austria, they are starting to do this. They're working on creating this because it's an inexhaustible source of free energy, of heat. We could run the world for 200,000 years and never run out of the heat from the center of the earth.
Right.
So all of this nonsense, and this is the kind of thing we've got to get behind things that make sense. And unfortunately, there's not a lot that we're going to be able to do about certain types of environmental stuff. It's cause and effect. We've screwed it. We, humanity, maybe not you and me and your listeners, or maybe, because we live on this world and drive cars and all the rest, we have contributed. But the point is, it's no longer possible to just close your eyes. We are going to see upheavals of, according to the Plejarans, apocalyptic proportions. There will be conditions that will be primeval coming about in certain places. Now there's activity going on in the Canary Islands, not with La Palma, the big, but other one now is bubbling up from under the water. If that blows, they've already said, and Plejarans said that's a prediction, right? That's going to go. And unless we make preparations for all the people on the East Coast, 20 to 30 million people would die? I can't even imagine this.
I can't either.
We are truly, So, I don't know. I mean, I don't even know are there questions that people have? What do they want to know? What do they want to do about this stuff? We're going to look back on these times, and we're going to be envious of the relative peace and quiet we have these days in the midst of the mess that already exists. We're going to think that this is paradise compared to what will come from our abuse of the earth. And that's really, that's the big one here.
We have to learn how to live in harmony and with balance with the earth, and we haven't learned our lesson. We just can't keep taking that oil out of Mother Earth and not, having huge earthquakes. I mean, there's been proof that when you take water out of, deep wells, and when you take the oil out, it's causing earthquakes. Like one place is like Arkansas with all the earthquakes they've had there, and right there is one of the major areas where they're taking a lot of oil out. So, we've got to stop. It's madness out there, Michael. It is.
Well, I think yesterday I just put up a very short blog with something like Oklahoma plus oil equals earthquakes. I have a friend who's moving from Oklahoma, and I was talking to her, and she said, well, these earthquakes, remember Oklahoma is a state with all these oil wells, and a lot of these quakes are within, 20 feet. So it's right in front of our eyes. And it's just that what happens is the earth does its thing, cause and effect takes place when it does according to its own timing. And if we're not smart enough to be seeing what's going on right here, it'll be a very difficult, couple hundred years here, literally. Right.
Well, I just see the only way of Mother Earth healing herself is to go through a cleansing. And, if she takes several million lives, then, so be it, It has to be that way because we're not going to stop. I don't see anybody stopping or, nobody is stopping with the oil. They're talking about BP, going back to the oil drilling back in the Gulf, I'm going, what are they thinking?
Well, they're not thinking. All that it is money, and we need this stuff, and that's the kind of mentality we're dealing with here. And it's pretty scary, to see that kind of thing. So, look, we know, thinking human beings everywhere know that this is insanity, but whether or not, I wish I had something new to say about it. It's just like,
I know.
It's the calm before the storm. It's the calm before the storm. That's all, you know?
Michael, do you think that if we all had a common goal and put our thoughts together, because thoughts are energy, that we could change everything? But it would take everybody coming together, and, you know, and I don't see that. You know, it's like everybody is for themselves, and, you know, we've got these corporations with all their greed and everything. They don't seem to care about the environment. So it just doesn't look like it's going to happen, unfortunately.
Well, to be realistic, it's not going to happen. That, you know, we don't want to pronounce those words, but that's the truth of the matter. It is not going to happen. It will happen later, but it will only happen when there's been so much cost on the individual and collective level that human beings will know that they have no choice, but to come together and to try to be rational and reasonable and live in peace with each other so that they can thrive. You know, this relentless pushing, I mean, what's going on here now politically, there's a push for an attack on Iran, and you know, and I'm not a political person, but you know if a Republican becomes president, they will launch or try to launch a war against Iran if it isn't pushed through, you know, earlier on Obama's watch. I don't think it's going to be, but I could be wrong. Meier was very clear. You know, he told me in 2006, if our country attacks Iran, Russia and China would probably attack our country. You know, I've got, you know, there are people I know that are talking about this imminent attack on Iran, and I said, well, you know, the Russians are in there. They have many advisors and scientists in Iran, and we haven't heard much from Russia, but I don't think they're going to sit still for it. And as soon as I said that, there was an article online where some Russian diplomat said unpredictable, you know, consequences will happen if you attack Iran. So I think that, you know, behind the scenes, there's a lot going on that people aren't privy to. There's probably all sorts of payoffs and negotiations and plots to assassinate and sabotage, you name it. It's all going on behind the scenes with, of course, the intention to try to stop Iran. Yeah. And, you know, Iran, on an objective level, a couple things can be said. You know, the Ahmadinejad guy is a terrorist, okay, it's pretty clear. You know, and he's been lying and all of that. And on another objective level, why is it that Iran couldn't or shouldn't have the same evil, horrible, life-ending weapons that Israel has, that Russia has, that the U.S. has? You know, why? Who are we to tell anybody what they can or can't have? Why are we afraid of people, except that we've so abused, in our government's name, we've abused people for, you know, far too long that we're hated. And that if they could, they sure would send something our way. You know, we want to get in there and keep their property and their minerals and their oil and all. No big secret here. No big secret. Right. So, you know, I'm just a guy trying to get the word out about what I think is the most important story in human history, and it happens to address all of these areas if people are interested. That's it.
Right, right.
That's it.
Michael, it looks like we have someone that has a question for you tonight. Let me get them on the line here. Hi, caller. You're on the air with Michael and Betsy.
Hi, good evening. Is that me?
Yeah, that's you. Do you have a question for Michael tonight?
Yeah, my name is Hugh. I'm calling from Virginia. I'm taking the more positive approach, and actually I feel I'm on a divine mission, and that's to bring spirituality into global economics and combine that with unconditional love. And I've had bizarre experiences throughout my entire life, which include UFO, paranormal, and near-death, and a lot of stuff that I can document things. So I know also how to work the elites to take away from them what they are controlling. And I'm just looking to get it out into the masses so that they all realize we have unlimited creativity. They're just not thinking correctly. If they will change their way of thinking, interact with existing technologies and with each other in collaborative, caring, sharing ways, things can happen very quickly and very peacefully and lovingly.
Did you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to see if you've addressed that area at all in your work of spirituality and global economics.
Well, yeah, let me put it this way. The core of the information in the Meier case is a spiritual teaching. It's far more important than anything that has to do with UFOs or extraterrestrials. Economics are, a reflection of consciousness, and as long as human beings are, in the kind of overall state of mind of lack, and also as long as the world is so vastly overpopulated that causes people to compete for ever-dwindling resources, we're going to have out-of-balance economic situations. And the idea of the elite and all that, okay, so there are people that manipulate these things, and, but nobody is all that powerful. The power comes mainly because human beings are ignorant. We overbreed, we strip the resources away, we pollute the world, and we overvalue material, wealth at the same time. It's not a simple thing of, well, if we just throw the bankers out, everything will be fine. All of the things we're seeing are very profound. They're, long in coming. And sure, a just economic system, spiritual truth, all those things should be worked for, as you yourself, are expressing your own purpose. In my opinion, that's nothing wrong with it. It's great. It's like, go for it. But we have to also understand that this is a very long range, a very long-term process, because it starts with each and every individual, not just pointing out that there are, elites or this, that, and the other thing. If we change our own thinking, those of us that don't think we have this power, we start to change our own thinking and be very, very careful about what we put out in our thoughts and our actions, we will change the world and take power back that way, more than protesting. The protests, for instance, and I'm just going a little over on you here on this, they will not amount to very much unless real leadership comes forward with very, very well thought out, concrete means of making real changes. And it's not evident at this point that people really know how to do that. So I've probably said way too much, but I thank you for your call. I know we're just about out of time here, and you're pointed in the right direction, and go for it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your call. Michael, we've got a half an hour if you can stay that long. I don't know if you can or not, but, that's up to you.
I would love to accept. I'm now at midnight in Brazil, and I've got to leave here early in the morning.
Okay.
Otherwise, next time when we visit, I should be able to do this from Los Angeles, in which case I'll be way ahead of the curve time-wise, and we can do as long a show as you want.
All right, Michael. Yeah, that's still... Well, I've got a lot more to talk to you about, and we can do it another time when you get back to L.A. I know it's a little difficult, and I didn't realize it was so late. I knew it would be late there, but I didn't know it was so late. So I want to thank you again for being on the show. It's been fascinating, and you're just a great guest. And, let's get you back again. We'll be in contact.
Well, good. I'd be delighted. Yeah, thank you. I think what happened, too, is our clocks went ahead and yours went back, perhaps. I don't know where you are, but most of the clocks in the States, right? So it got 2 hours ahead in effect, you know, more here. But yes, thank you very much, and we will do it again, and we'll do it, you know, with a little more time to spare. And I very much, again, appreciate the opportunity, and, you know, here's to positive change and, you know, enduring and triumph.
Absolutely,
so
Michael.
Thank you, Betsy.
Thank you, and enjoy Brazil. Okay, thanks, Michael. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
When I was with him this last time, one thing I wanted to specifically address, which I did, was the movement of troops by Russia and subsequently by Canada in the areas, you know, not far from the Arctic. For the Russians, they announced in July that they were moving troops into the area, a city called Arkhangelsk. I don't know if you've heard of that city. Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't.
Well, you know, I haven't either, and I think probably a lot of your listeners haven't. And the first time I did hear about it was in about 2002 when I got the Enoch prophecies that were given to Meier in '87 and had been published in German, and I got a booklet of them in Switzerland and came back and had them translated and put up on the website. And there, as people can, you know, see for themselves, Meier talks about the movement of troops into Arkhangelsk. And the reason he mentions that, or should attribute it to the prophet Enoch, he says, and this is supposedly a prophecy many thousands of years old before there really was officially a Russia, but it said in there that Russia would eventually launch attacks, invasions of Scandinavia, also of Iran and Turkey, and it would invade for laying claims around the Arctic or even, you know, the Antarctic for, you know, mineral rights and all of this stuff. So, you know, it's like this has been posted on my website since 2002. We're going on 10 years. It's as clear as day. And people are saying, well, why doesn't Meier give us new prophecies? And, you know, it's like we're supposed to be entertained. This isn't about entertainment. We are seeing the fulfillment of the, unfortunately, highly unpleasant prophecies and predictions before our very eyes. What more do people want?
Good question, Michael.
So,
what do they
there
want?
it is. Yes. Well,
go ahead.
Yeah. You know, I have a blog, and I just blogged the other day. I put up a blog pertaining to what just happened in Washington regarding the turning down of the petition effectively. I mean, it was the government said pertaining to this petition that people were, you know, convinced that they must sign, and I've said for well over a year, maybe two, to stop wasting your time with this nonsense, this utter nonsense.
You visited one of the most beautiful places on earth, Switzerland, to see Billy. So how is Billy doing?
Yes, well, actually, I visited 3 really beautiful places, but Switzerland would be, let's say, the most beautiful in terms of natural beauty. Billy seems to be doing quite well. He's a very resilient guy at 74 years of age. He's got plenty of different health challenges going on, and yet he always seems to bounce back very nicely, and I'm glad to be able to say that. And we spent, almost a couple hours talking off and on while I was there, so I was very grateful for that. It was a lot of fun.
So did he share any new predictions with you, or?
Well, it's not that there's new predictions, and I kind of want to make this as clear to people as possible. He has, of course, written and published his own prophecies and predictions since he was 14 years of age, that being back, in 1951. Yeah, it's okay. He also, of course, has published the prophecies and predictions of the prophets Enoch, Elijah, and Isaiah. And over the years and over the decades, one after another, unfortunately, of the prophecies and predictions have been coming true.
Before we get to some of the amazing predictions given to Billy through the years, why don't you tell the listeners about your new video news? I know the word free is in there, so go ahead and tell them about that. I think that's pretty exciting.
Oh, yeah. We just, in the last week and a half, almost 2 weeks, we put our film, The Silent Revolution of Truth, up for free viewing. And free is always good, as you say, and it's viewable on my site, theyfly.com, or at ufotv.com, which I think may have a bigger window to watch it in than we do on my site. But there it is, the whole 96 minutes or so of it, for free, and we've gotten close to 72,000 people, I think, have watched the film already.
I saw that.
That's quite a lot of folks.
That's great, Michael. That was really nice of you to do that for everyone. I know if the listeners think you sound like you're long distance, you really are. You're in Brazil. So there might be a little delay there, so I just wanted to let them know that. But I know recently
across Alaska into the United States and involved Canada. Now, when I read that in 2002, it didn't make any sense to me. I didn't know anything about Archangelisk, and I certainly couldn't understand why Canada would be mentioned as being involved in some hypothetical war between Russia and the U.S. So, when the Russians announced their troop movements, it was tied in as well with laying claims or going to stake claims to certain mineral rights. Then, a month or so later, whatever it was exactly, when Canada announces its troop movements in or near the Arctic, it's to make some declarations of their own about claims for certain territories and resources. Okay, so one of the things I discussed with Billy was, and I asked him, I said, look, in the past few months there's been this Russian troop movement to Archangelisk, then there's been these Canadian troop movements, and this sounds to me like the very first steps of what's foretold in the Enoch prophecies pertaining to Russia, Canada, and the U.S. And he said, yes, it's exactly what's happening, and there will be some other countries that will involve themselves